Hello and welcome to the third subpool. Here we have some familiar names, but let's not delay too long. Up first we have Flypaste up against Dukeslayer. You can see Flypaste is bringing largely these guys, which are mine-laying ships that carry a few drones. So they should be pretty effective at all ranges, but mostly he wants them to crash into people and then bounce off. Then over here we have a larger mine-laying trapper design with proton swords on the fringes. So that thing will do all sorts of harm to anything that happens to get caught in it. And then for Duke, we have pretty standard dual gun tank roll. A straightforward design, but one that has proven time and time again that it works. And some drone wielding distractors. But let's see how this goes. You can see the firing pattern out of Duke's ships. He spent a lot of time making sure that that firing pattern happened, and it is pretty neat. I think it was based on some of what he saw with the Chinese ships and how they actually behave, and he was trying to emulate that. But unfortunately, I don't think he's got enough damage output to deal with the sheer bulk of Flypaste's fleet. You can see, even as long as the fight's been going, for the first 30 seconds, Flypaste only just lost his first ship. But that said, I think Flypaste is going to have a very hard time catching him on account of the whole tank roll versus large ship problem. But we'll see how that goes. I've been surprised before. The corner does seem to be posing a bit of a problem for Duke, however. As you can see, some of his ships have gotten trapped. He's lost the bulk of his fleet and given up quite a few points doing it. I think round one is all but in the bag for Flypaste. And Flypaste takes round one. So round two, I don't know if that's going to go too much different. The ships from Dukeslayer are very much burst oriented rather than sustained damage oriented, and so they're going to have a tremendously hard time dealing with Flypaste's fleet and pretty much everything else in his pool, actually. although Duke did manage to take round 2. Obviously, as long as his ships manage to not get pinned in the corner, they'll be fine. But if they do get caught in the corner, they disappear pretty quickly, as Tinkerel ships tend to do. But Duke putting up quite a bit of points here in round 3 as well. But you can see that Flypaste still has 16 out of 17 ships. And it really doesn't take a whole lot for one of Duke's ships to get caught in a corner. And that's really all it takes. And that can turn around in just a second. But Duke does look like he has plenty of space to maneuver now. He might just take this one. And Dukeslayer takes round 3. So up next we have Flypaste against Armorfer. And you can see Armorfer's bringing a variant of his usual design. These ones are much smaller, which I'm pretty sure is due to the lack of stacking allowed in the tournament. But Flypaste does this as well. So you'll see that some of the submissions with asteroid thrusters will have a second thruster on the end. Armorfer using the largest thrusters, while Flypaste uses the smallest. What that does is it causes the entire stack to inherit the boost coefficient of the thruster at the end. Normally, one of the drawbacks of the asteroid thruster is that it has a half second before it winds up to normal speed. Until then, it's running at like half output. But putting a normal thruster on the end of it causes the asteroid thruster instead to inherit the 2.0 boost and for like 2 seconds or whatever it is, which you really only see that in 2 situations. And the first is with asteroid thrusters using smaller thrusters so that they can accelerate more quickly. The other time you'll see it is with bees. Bees will use impulse thrusters, which are good thrusters in their own, but then they'll put a small maneuvering thruster on the end of it to give the impulse thruster stack the maneuvering thrusters boost coefficient of 5, which really helps bees be fast beyond compare. But we do see Armorfer taking a very solid round 1. I think Flypaste's reliance on mines is going to have a detrimental effect on its performance. He's decided the last few tournaments that he wants to prove the efficacy of mines, and I think we're seeing it. The Armor for his fleet is much more numerous, but the ships individually are much smaller than we're accustomed to seeing. Armor for typically designs very large snail-looking ships, and these ones still have the antenna, but they're much smaller than his usual fare. You can see Armfer taking a solid lead in round 2 as well. While the antennae are actually still intact, I don't think Flypaste's trappers are big enough to grab Armor ships. I think they can they'll just bounce off the edge of the trapper's arms. But you can kind of see the trapper here working as intended. As its proton swords managed to cut apart one of Armor ships. But I fear its days are numbered. And there it is. Armor takes the match. Up next we have Flypaste against Drills 007. Drills is bringing his sort of staple flagship design at this point, with the relatively non-critical center flanked by big guns, a very dueling style setup. And then this guy, I think this is the Barber, I'm not really sure. The fleet's name is Barber AfterShock Patrol, but I think this is the Barber itself, but I don't really know. Let's see what else we've got. Rockets, autocannons, torpedoes. Can't really go wrong with torpedoes. These guys here you can see are carrying a lot of torpedoes and a proton beam actually. And over here we have lasers, plasma cannon, and proton swords. A fairly heavy armament out of Drill's fleet. Although here we're probably going to actually see the mine layers be of considerable value. The splash radius on mines is actually deceptively large. I think it's one of the largest splash radii in the Terran lineup, which allows them to punch over armor and destroy internals, which I'm thinking is what we're seeing here, because there are a lot of ships that are dying with a large portion of their hull intact, and I'm pretty sure that's owed to the mines just punching over armor. The largest ship from Drill is though holding up a little bit better than the rest of the fleet. You can see I think the Barber is probably not long for this world. But Drill's flagship is still in relatively good condition. I do also like that Flypaste changed his colors from his usual pattern so that you can see all of the mines that he puts down a bit more easily. It's easy enough to see when actually watching the game render it in real time, but video compression tends to do awful things with small objects. Drill's fleet trying its damnedest to claw this one back. And that flagship is certainly pulling its weight. But I'm thinking it might be in over its head now. There's too many ships to have to deal with. Jules has built up a point lead though, so as long as that flagship survives, he probably has this one handled. And it's looking like Jules is going to take round 1 on points. Flypaste did manage to get off to an early point lead, so that might be pretty indicative of how this is going to play out here as well. Jules' flagship is just too large to really be vulnerable to mine laying shenanigans, and as a result, it's just kind of sitting there murdering things. Very large portions of Jules' fleet, however, are very much so vulnerable to the shenanigans out of Flypastes. The kiters with the proton beams are actually doing rather well though. The proton beams don't have really great uptime on target, but they are hitting pretty consistently with their torpedoes. And that's really about all you can ask. The torpedoes are the bulk of its payload anyway. And it's looking like Jules is going to be taking round 2. And Jules takes match. So up next we have Flypaste against Toxico. Toxico bringing a Sentinel fleet to the field. You can see the a few melee spikes on these little guys and some plasma bolts, annihilators, plasma bolts. He's got a mixture of the actual armor and the armor spikes and some of the hull segments. And Sentinel hull pieces aren't very good, but this guy's also using an obliterator, which we don't see too many obliterators, but this tournament seems to be a bit of an exception. We've been seeing quite a few on our Sentinel submissions so far. I'm not sure if obliterator magic is going to work overly well against Flypaste's fleet though. However, Sentinel cannons generally work against everything. I often talk about how sentinel cannons are some of the best weapons in the game, and when people talk about sentinels and the things that make them scary, you generally hear about melee armor, nukes, and their overall hit points. But their cannons themselves are actually very, very good. The rate of fire is a little low, but their range is rather high, and the fact that all of their cannons are explosive and very cost efficient is rather nice. But here we see the Sentinel problem, where these two ships have become a ship. I don't know if that's going to work out in Toxico's favor, but it might. It might help concentrate firepower a little bit. This round is looking a little less promising for Toxico. I think the two ships getting stuck together did not prove to be an asset. I think that was a hindrance. As Flypaste takes round 2, and with the zoom out you can see just how extensive a minefield Flypaste was able to create. Minefields can be very devastating if they get a chance to actually build up, but you need them to actually build up, which sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't. Depends quite a bit on the ebb and flow of the battle. And I think that's one of the things Flypaste is shooting for, is to keep the battle relatively stationary, if not slowly pushing the opponent. You can see several of the mine layers were shoving Toxico's obliterator ship. And they did manage to get it, but the asteroid thrusters are strong enough that they were able to actually maneuver the enemy around for them. These smaller ships are holding on fairly well, though. But you can only ask so much. And Flypaste does have a lot of proton swords on the field. Actually, that last ship managed to be a hero and score enough points that Toxico won the match. A close fight, but one that Toxico decided to take home. Up next we have Waste 47 up against Flypaste. As I recall, these are actually an older design of Wastes. They largely revolve around using these antimatters, though you can also see the plasma mortar array in the front. These ships are relatively small though, which I think is going to mean that, or going to give a field day to those mines that Flypaste is generously donating to the battlefield. And the trapper pinning the shark up against the wall, giving round 1 very securely to Flypaste. And with how round 1 went, I wouldn't be too surprised if round 2 went basically the same. And it looks like round 2 is going to be going the same as round 1. There's just very little that Waste 47 can do in this matchup, I think. And there it is. Flypaste takes round 2. So up next we have Dukeslayer up against Armifer. Not really sure how this is going to go. Dukeslayer did a pretty good job of applying damage to Flypaste's fleet, and I think Armifer's fleet is a bit slower. But at the same time, Armifer's got a lot of ships, and so as his fleet kind of rolls forward, which ship is in front will rotate, and you can see the antenna on one of Armifer's ships actually caught Dukeslayer's, one of Dukeslayer's ships, and more or less sealed its doom. Tinker's ships are legendary in their damage and range, and also legendary in how quickly they can be destroyed. Relative to their thruster output, Tinker will actually have the worst armor in the game, even worse than Farmers and Reds. Which essentially means that Tinker will have to have their shields alive in order to function. And shields don't do all that well under direct fire, as we've seen more than a few times. And you can kind of see what I mean by the ship in front rotating as the fleet on the whole rolls forward. The end result being that a minute and a half into the match, Dukeslayer doesn't have any kills. I think that ship on the bottom of the screen might be about to die. Nope, managed to slip out. However, Armor 4 does take round 1. And I'm not sure that round 2 is going to go a whole lot different. The Tinkerol, especially kind of the standard designs of Tinkerol, have always struggled with armored craft. You have to design specifically for it. Which is not terribly unlike a lot of the other factions, but with Terran, for example, you can build a big block of armor, give it a ton of missiles, and call it a day. It's not optimal, but it will handle targets at range and targets up close. Tinkerol, you have to completely change the design philosophy of your ship in order to adequately deal with a heavily armored target. And we're seeing basically the same thing we saw last round, where these last few ships are just going to keep circling around and rotating what they're shooting at. But I don't think Dukeslayer is going to be able to score too many more points. I think he's done about all that he's going to be able to do. And Armor 418 wins the match. So next up we have Dukeslayer up against Drills. Here I don't know, Dukeslayer might actually be able to take this one. I don't know if he'll be able to kill the main battleship or even the Barber, but I think all of these little guys are going to be well within Dukeslayer's kill potential. Does look like Duke has scored enough points though. I think he'll probably be able to win this matchup. And Dukeslayer takes round 1. So up next, I imagine this one's going to go pretty similarly. Because of the nature of how Duke's fleet attacks, they kind of will find vulnerabilities if they exist. Mostly because they circle around and fire from a variety of angles, and if your fleet splits up, then they can pretty easily pick apart stragglers. But all of Drills' smaller ships, as you can see on the right side, are very much subject to being more or less instantly destroyed by Duke's snipers, which is the Tinkerel way. And with Duke again maintaining a pretty healthy point lead, it's looking like he'll be taking round 2. Though Drills did manage to catch one of Duke's snipers, and you can see just how quickly the points rack up. And Dukeslayer wins the match. So up next we have Dukeslayer up against Toxico. I feel like this, at least as long as Toxico's ships don't get stuck together, I feel like Toxico will have a bit of an advantage because of the Obliterator. If Dukeslayer's ships get too close to the Obliterator ship, it can do quite a bit of damage very quickly. But at the same time, if they kind of bounce away like that, then Duke's just going to slowly score points. I don't know that Duke's going to be able to kill any of the larger craft from Toxico, not without considerable focused fire. But the two ships being stuck together is certainly working out in Dukeslayer's favor. And as you can see, despite being focused by a very large portion of Dukeslayer's fleet, they're still having a very hard time killing one of the smaller ships from Toxico. Those two ships getting stuck together really is hurting Toxico's performance, though. And there's not really anything you can do about that except don't play Sentinels. But as far as I'm aware, nobody's really found a pattern for why it happens. It just does it sometimes, which does not make it any less annoying. And I feel like Toxico has a much better chance here, because you can see the Obliterator ship didn't get stuck to one of the other ships right off the bat, which I think is immensely advantageous. The Obliterator has a little bit longer range than all of the Sentinel cannons, and of course because it's a laser, it tends not to miss. Its only real downsides are its cost and its its cost and its long charging time. It also, I kind of consider it a downside that it's pretty inconsistent, but sometimes that works out really well in your favor, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, it looks solidly advantageous for Duke in this matchup. But as the clock winds down, it's seeming an awful lot like Dukeslayer will be taking round 2. And Duke takes it. So next up we have Dukeslayer up against Shark by Waste 47. This is a sniper fleet, a non-Tinkerel sniper fleet against a Tinkerel sniper fleet. I will never bet against Tinkerel in a sniper on sniper fight. And here you can see Dukeslayer's fleet taking a pretty clean round 1. I'd be pretty amazed if round 2 went a whole lot different. And up next we have Armor Fur against Drills. I'm not entirely sure. I think Armor Fur has a pretty solid advantage here. The battleship from Drills will undoubtedly cause a lot of harm, but I think Armor Fur's fleet is just going to drown Drills' fleet in sheer mass. And here you can see the point difference starting to rack up in Armor Fur's favor. And as the battleship finds itself more and more surrounded, it's losing all of its weapons that are placed off center, which is slowly digging into its ability to deal damage. And it's looking like Armor Fur is going to be taking a pretty solid round 1. Don't know if that I think betting against Armor Fur's fleet in round 2 would be a folly. And you'll see Armor Fur is doing one of the tricks that I like to do when I'm building Terran, is include a small number of missiles on every ship, which kind of gives every ship in the fleet the ability to reach out and deal a bit of damage to kiters and anything keeping its distance. It helps ensure that even the most distant ships are still valuable in the fight. And it's rather easy to overlook too, mostly because you don't have the big cloud of missiles, so they don't generally show up when the game starts to zoom out. But they certainly do have their effect. And the missiles also, of course, prevent regeneration, helping make damage more sticky. And up now we have Armor up against Toxico. I think Armor also has the advantage here, largely because of raw health on the field. Same thing Armor's been doing to most of the other matches so far. And as you can see, Armor's taking round 1 pretty solidly as well. Expecting round 2 will probably go the same. And now we've got Armor up against Waste 47. Here, I'm not entirely sure Waste 47 is going to be able to kill Armor ships. They're a little too durable for Waste's weapon output. But we'll see how it plays out. I think Armor has the advantage here, though. Yeah, and as you can see, Waste 47 did manage to kill one of our first ships, but I don't believe he'll be able to keep that up, and certainly won't be able to kill the rest of the fleet, especially as his ships are starting to take damage and get it pinned up on the wall and stuff like that. Once they start to fall, there's not really a whole lot of recovering for them. But Armor takes round 1. And I'd be very surprised if round 2 went a whole lot different. I do have to admit though, I'm very fond of how the mortar array looks as it fires its projectiles at this range. You can sort of just see them glowing. Looks pretty fantastic. And Armor takes the match, which gives Armor 5 wins and Dukeslayer 4 wins, which means the two of them are advancing to the champion pool. But we will certainly play the rest of this sub-pool out. I do feel as though in this matchup, Toxico probably has a bit of an advantage. I don't know, Drill's battleship has proven itself a few times. It's really hard to count that thing out, but Toxico's largest ship is pretty devastating. I don't know. It does appear that Drills is off to a much stronger start at the very least. Yeah, I'm feeling like Drills has this one in the bag. The battleship is attacking from the rear, which is letting it get at the softer armor of Toxico's ships. You can see the smaller ship from Toxico killed several of Drill's ships before driving off, but now it's chasing a kiter, which I don't think is going to go overly well for it. As you can see, the full weight of the remainder of Drill's fleet starting to be brought to bear. And Drills takes round 1. And this time one of Toxico's smaller ships managed to get caught inside of the bigger one, which is less than ideal, I think. And yeah, it looks like Drills will be taking round 2 as well. There's not really a whole lot of answer in Toxico's fleet for this battleship and all of the torpedoes that the support fleet's able to bring to bear. And Drills takes the match. So up next we have Drills up against Waste 47. Now, here I'm feeling like Drills probably does have the advantage. The ships from Waste 47 I think are going to struggle with the larger craft out of Drill's fleet, and meanwhile it just takes a couple of seconds of shenanigans for one of Waste 47 ships to get killed. There's plenty of damage output on the field. Waste's doing a good job of scoring some points and disengaging though. If the ships do manage to keep that up, then they'll do very well. But the AI sometimes likes to change its mind about doing things that are working. And yeah, much to my surprise, it looks like Waste 47 will be taking round 1. The battleship from Drill is holding up pretty well, but struggling to deal with multiple aggressors. And at this point, multiple aggressors are getting to the stage where it's kind of inevitable. The ships from Waste 47, as you can see, are very maneuverable, and their point defense is holding up very well against the missiles that Drills is able to put out, but Waste takes round 1. But with Drill's battleship catching one of the only two remaining sharks, I suspect Drill's has not relinquished his opportunities here. He's making a pretty strong showing here in the second round, showing that the entire success or failure of his fleet is going to hinge on whether or not the battleship can catch one of Waste's ships up against a wall. And as long as you can, obviously it's going to be a pretty solid win for Waste, or for Drills. And Waste 47 takes it. So up next we have Toxico against Waste 47. The advantage here, I think, is in Waste 47's favor. As long as he doesn't get Obliterator magic used against him, then he should be fine. These ships definitely have the advantage in range and speed. Toxico has the durability advantage, of course, but if Waste 47 ships behave instead of charging in like they did, then Toxico just won't have much of an opportunity to do damage. But instead of bringing their A game, the ships decided to do something else instead. And there's some Obliterator magic. The theme of the tournament so far. Obliterators, what can they do for you? And Toxico tanks round 1. Some disrespect, some obliterator magic. Really does change the pace of the game. And with a bit of disrespect right there, it's looking like Toxico will probably be taking round 2 as well. And you can see Toxico has no reverse thrust on his designs either, which is going to make it problematic if the enemy does manage to get behind him, but it seems to work out well enough there. So there you have it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.